Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Educate podcast. I'm joined today with Rohit. How's it going, my friend?
It's going great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Where are you based?
We're right now in Madrid,
Oh,
Madrid,
nice.
Spain.
Oh, amazing. Um, yeah, I guess maybe a little background about yourself, um, how you got into education space, um, maybe the culture of education in Spain, in Madrid currently, and we can kind of go from there.
Sure. Well, being a teacher has always been one of my goals. So since I was a kid, it's very strange. I know it's very weird, but yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to share. I wanted to help people learn because I had developed my own methodology of learning, which was a little kind of also kind of hectic and haywire the way I learned to learn, because well, I was born in Spain, but I was raised partly between the United States and India. I was able to live in both places for a while, and I did part of my schooling in India as well, part of my schooling in Spain, and then some higher education in the States.
Hmm,
So those are my three, that's my triangle.
nice. Yeah, I would love to maybe stick on that, the differences, similarities, um, changes that uh, go from US, India, Spain. I know different cultures, different
Right.
environment, but maybe how does it all tie together in the bigger scope of education?
Right. Well, if we talk about the case in India, well, I studied in India about 30 years ago. That was a really long time ago. And most of the education was done through the British education system. It was like the old colonial, very, very traditional type of education system, which is not entirely bad in terms of content and knowledge, but it was very bad in terms of teaching methods. I mean, it was not very optimized nor updated. It was never taken the student into account. It was a little, traditional, typical army-based kind of training, which is traditional, education. Well, Spain is a totally different story. Spain is a little more laid back. It's there's not much respect given to education. Whereas in Asian countries, education is super important because it's probably the only way to get you out of your situation. Here in Spain, in Europe, all in all, everything is a little more laid back. Everything is more student centered, which is great, of course. However, I've noticed that, and since I'm very much in touch with the Spanish education system, slowly, things have been getting a little worse, in kind of less and less effective in terms of uh, the students that we want to, I hate using this word, the students that we want to teach or produce in such in a way. It's not as effective I think it could be. Like there are people that stand out, of course, there always be there, but then there are people that lag a lot. And that was not the case in the past. I mean, there was like a small minority that lagged in terms of content and acquisition and whatnot. And right now there's like an elite that is standing out, which is not totally fair for an education system.
Why do you think that is? It's so funny you mentioned that. I was listening to another podcast about the British education system, and they were saying it is seemingly getting worse. I, I know there might be myriad of reasons, but why do you think that is?
Well, when it comes to the British education system currently or the Spanish education system?
Or maybe would Europe be different as a whole, and each country is a little unique? Maybe specifically in Madrid and what you're seeing in Spain.
That I would totally think that. Yes, I think that the Finnish have their own system, the Dutch have their own system, which the Norwegians, they have their own system. And apparently, at least from the outside, they seem to be much more effective than the one we are using here in Spain, for example.
Hmm.
When it comes to the British education system, I haven't had much contact right now, but I know it has evolved. I don't know if it's for the worse or for the better, but I know it's not as it used to be, typical colonial type of, education, very army based, everything is instructed, you do as you're told. I don't think that's the case right now. I think they've evolved in a certain way, and I don't know exactly what the situation is. I haven't heard good things, but I just don't want to put my finger on it because I really don't know firsthand.
Sure. And yeah, maybe I would love to come back to that, but going back to your expertise, your knowledge, what subjects do you focus on? Where's kind of your passion? I know with education it's so broad and we can find a lot of things that are wrong. There's a lot of things that are good, but specifically with you, I'm curious where your passion, expertise is in.
It's basically in language learning or language teaching. That's where I love spending time on. I've been teaching languages, especially English, for the last 22 years. So, you know, and being in Spain, it's kind of a job that you'll always have. We hope, you know, in the future it's going to be better. But Spaniards have had that lack of language exposure for a very long time, and that's where I come in. You know, I've taught a lot of students for a very long time, and that's where I can help my students the most in language acquisition, especially English.
And is there a specific age group that you focus on?
No, but throughout my career, I've focused from, you know, I've gone from 3-year-olds till adults, you know, working adults. So yeah.
Nice.
Right now, I'm focusing a lot on adults, especially because over here in Spain, there's a big demand for certificate training in English knowledge. So you have to actually pass an exam, so you're certified in your English level. Because English is like spoken as a second, as a foreign language, not as a second language, as a foreign language here in Spain. So it's very important for Spaniards to get that certificate.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like English is a global language, more and more with the interconnectivity of the world. It's becoming a essential skill to have. Do you think is there a difference between like the spoken English, or do people have to understand the text and kind of communicating just textually online? Is there a difference between a priority of like, do we have to understand the text more or speaking kind of?
I think I know what you mean. Is there a big gap between what is formally accepted as English and what is actually spoken or seen as English? Yes, there is a huge gap. At least here in Spain, the way we learn English or the way English is taught is very academic. Everything is, of course, grammar based, exercise based. There's hardly any speaking practice that you get, or hardly any listening practice that you get. You know, there are 4 skills that we've broken up language learning into. And in Spain, right now, of course, it's evolving, it's changing, but traditionally, everything was grammar based. All you needed to learn were grammar rules, and partially some importance was given to vocabulary learning, but none of it was actually implemented. You never had the chance to apply whatever you were learning because everything was on paper. You had to pass an exam, and that was it. But now, being exposed to a European environment, a global environment, I mean, all your formal or academic English does not get you, that does not serve you right for a meeting, for example, or a presentation, which is more communicative.
I see. You mentioned those 4 skills. Can you highlight that for us?
Oh, sure. Of course, it's always reading comprehension, listening, writing, and of course, speaking. Those are the 4 main skills that we tend to develop when you want to learn a language.
I see. Our focus primarily has been with children, like you mentioned, from ages 3 to I would say 12, 13, kind of entering into high school. Is there any tips, strategies, tactics that you have that can accelerate their learning of the English language? And I ask this because I come from Iran. I was born there. I came here, immigrated to the US, and I came here in the 2nd grade, and it felt like I would never learn English, but just being assimilated, like talking, speaking, broken, just trying, I learned it. And then I just had a love for like reading. I would want to read books, and my curiosity would drive that. But I have friends who have children here, and cousins and family members, and it's fascinating that the pace of what they're learning or lack of what they're learning, like I'm teaching them some grammar and telling them some vocab, and I'm like, are they not telling you guys this at school? Or like, you guys are born here, isn't it supposed to be more natural? But what are some tactics that can kind of speed up that learning process, specifically with language?
I think we need to strike a balance there. I mean, your description of the situation right now is, I wouldn't say alarming, but it is kind of what it is, right? We have totally the opposite side of that spectrum. We totally get, into academic and grammar based, and everything is so formal.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best way to make anyone learn anything in terms of languages is exposing them to things they connect with, exposing them to resources they can engage with. It's like, I know it's kind of a very cliche term right now. It's very hands-on. It has to be very hands-on, but it doesn't physically mean hands-on. It has to be useful to you as a learner. If you're able to connect with that content or with that piece of material that you're providing as a teacher, and the student connects with it entirely, that's where you win. That's exactly, no matter what you do, that's going to be meaningful to that particular student. And that's what I think interests the most to that difficult age group, which is 13 to 15. They're all not thinking about studying or learning anything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not going to say that was my favorite age group, but it was very easy for me to connect with them because it was easy to identify what each one of them liked. I mean, teenagers have, their own likings already super defined. They like their own type of music, movies, the books that they read, you've read them. So it was very easy for me to connect with them and make it interesting to them, or what I was trying to help them learn, of course.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So kind of individualizing, personalizing the lesson education to that individual student. Now,
Sure.
I've spoken with quite a few teachers. We have uh, a good relationship with a lot of them, and just trying to get some of these answers. What I've heard often is that in the classroom, when there are 30, 40 students, there isn't enough time to individualize it to each
Absolutely.
person. So there's kind of the standard, they follow it. And then from the student's perspective, being one, speaking to students, it's kind of like, well, it's boring for me because I don't relate. How can we make that bridge?
That's right. I'm going to say something very controversial.
Okay.
I think social networks
Mm-hmm.
have homogenized our teenagers. That means all of them, I'm not going to say they think the same way, but they all consume probably the same type of content. They're all exposed to the same type of things. They all dress the same way. They all listen to the same type of music. So it's very easy for me to create a lesson for the masses in a class.
Mm-hmm.
So if they like, I don't know, I don't know what kids read nowadays, but I don't know if they're reading a lot. You see, that's the problem. My disconnection. As the older I get, the more disconnected I feel from them. But I'm sure they're watching their TikToks, their Facebooks, or Instagrams,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is kind of repeated over and over again on those social networks. So it's easier for me to identify what they like, even if it's not for 100% of the students that I teach. I know 70% have watched this video or will feel identified with that other piece that I got from the whatever resources I used. So it's easier right now to do that, to make that connection.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. On kind of switching subjects on your passion, maybe a goal of yours that, if accomplished, you would be uh, very happy with. I know you're doing more with adults, but I think learning languages or anything applies to all ages.
Right.
What would be your goal that, if accomplished, you'd be like, okay, I did my job. This is this is fulfilling for me, it's helping someone else. What kind of gives you that joy when you see in another person that they've learned something?
There you go. The only thing I wish I could do is do my job for free. That's all I wish I could do. I wouldn't mind teaching 20 hours a day and doing it for free if all the other needs were covered. Because I know that language acquisition, especially English, opens so many doors, especially for, I would say Southeast Asians or underdeveloped, I don't want to use that word, but underdeveloped countries. If I could give them that access, it's a rite of passage right there. If I help them refine their English or make it perfect in order to access a more globalized economy or workforce or whatever, that my job is done. If I've helped somebody open a door with whatever I've taught them, that's fine. That's great. That's I would love doing that every single day.
Yeah, I was recently communicating with, I forgot the organization's name, but I will link it in the description. They are focusing on the countries or states of Africa, or the country of Africa, and especially with underprivileged children and teaching them English. They have a program down that they have a 90% success rate of teaching children English within a year with 1 to 2 hours of day of practice,
That's amazing.
which is just amazing. Now, the founder, I think it's a nonprofit, but the founder is the founder of Stable Diffusion, which is a AI, artificial intelligence, open source software. And I have to ask because I feel like this is the next wave of internet development or intelligence boom that I don't know what's going to happen with it, but it's going to affect every like category of our life and education as well. Like I had have you heard of, and is it circulating in Spain? Open AI, artificial
Sure.
intelligence,
Of
chat
course.
GPT. Are you guys?
Of course. Yeah. I
Um,
think it's the buzz right now.
yeah, I have to ask, and like, what are your thoughts overall around that? Is it good? Is it harmful? Um, it's here, it's out of the box, so
Right.
there's no going back. But what are kind of your thoughts around that, just as a high level?
I haven't given it much thought. I just find it fascinating that
Mhm.
all this is possible right now. But like at first glance, as you said, at a high level, I think it's going to take over lots of jobs.
Mhm.
I know human factor or the human touch whenever you do a job, and especially when it comes to uh, creating or instilling knowledge, is very important. I don't know for how long that's going to be
Mhm.
a factor that's going to influence somebody's learning ability. I really don't know. However, I have a feeling that at least in the education world, um, for a while now, I would say, and this again, this is something that I think it's a very critical opinion. Bad teachers are totally expendable. That means, there we go. Up to now, bad teachers had a place, but I think after the advent of AI, of course, AI, which is probably one of the biggest revolutions ever, those are going to be expendable. I mean, you're not going to want to, put up with a bad teacher. You can just look it up on your wonderful open AI
Mhm.
and it'll be much better explained. I think that's where the selection is going to happen.
Yeah, and the reason why little uh, my earlier question on text English versus spoken, if even if we have a concept of English down, maybe the comprehension, like you said, the grammar, just the logic of English, and we can ask that to OpenAI or ChatGPT or whatever,
Sure.
it can come back with a text that is better English than the person actually knows, and they can
Sure.
use that as their own. So I had one of my cousins maybe a few months ago when these AI apps are popping up, and he sent me an essay that he wrote for school using this, and I don't know if I should have been worried or like shockingly surprised, saying, okay, they're using this stuff, but it's like, how do schools monitor this? And just opens up so much of that Pandora's box. But yeah, we're looking into it, trying to see how we can uh, not combat this, but like how we can use it to monitor, help advance education, whether that's teachers and the students. Because if the students are going to use this to, let's say, write papers and solve problems, the teachers have to know how to use it to grade those papers and figure out how they figured out those problems. So hopefully we use it for the best. Um, Kind of switching subjects off this deep topic and kind of going back. What would you say on the, again, children level, ages from kindergarten to say eighth grade? What are the foundational things, the most important things that they have to learn at those ages in order to be successful going into high school and then the university?
That's such a great question, because I think I want to give a brief answer to that. I think today we don't have much time, but I think that's such a great question, Arjun. I think nobody's asking them. I mean, nobody's wondering about that. We have set curriculum, standardized testing, and that's, everybody goes through that same, thing. But yeah, I always go back, and it's very ironic. I consider myself a very modern teacher, with all these wonderful resources. But I always go back, and I always tell my wife is also a teacher. I always tell her, I wish our children knew more about the world. I wish, it's great that they get to do, I don't know, quantum physics at school, and they, get to study all the science that is, but I wish they knew like general knowledge, like things in general. I wish they had more of that. More, I know, and she tells me, but that's useless. That doesn't help anyone. I said, I know, but if you're able to connect that general knowledge with what you know now, it's much easier to get a global understanding of everything. And what I say by general knowledge is, I don't know, teaching kids to relate the reasons for the French Revolution, or which I think is kind of currently being done with essay writing and all of that. But I want those bits of information, like what do you know and how do you connect those? I think that's what's missing.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point. And like you said, maybe that is being taught in history. Like there are those subjects, at least in the US, where those things get covered. I remember, obviously, we had our math, we had our English, we had our history, we had our sciences, and physical education, which is a big part of it as well, which I don't think kids are getting enough of today, being in front of computers, PC gaming. But maybe it brings up, and I want to kind of unravel this, like the truth. I understand what you're saying, understanding the world, how it works, but we're kind of figuring that out ourselves now too.
Sure.
It's like, what is true? What happened in Soviet Russia? What happened in China? What happened in these states? We get our information from sources, various sources. They put out stories, we read them, we distill them, and then figure out what's true. Like, I'm trying to understand for kids, like, how can we get, does it come back to like their curiosity, and do we have
sure.
pull that out from them?
That's exactly it, Arjun. We need to make it interesting for them to know. Like, of course, when we go to complex issues like world history, or those are very, very big things to cover, big areas to cover. But I would say, like, those trivia questions, like if I ask somebody something, they should have a quick answer to that. That's what I want them to connect, those bits, and then get a global idea. That's what we're teaching them at school, but they're not able to connect those little bits. It's like everything is so vague and so huge in that scope that when you ask them about a small, tiny detail, they're not able to produce it. I think that's what I miss the most. And when I say general knowledge, I totally mean trivia questions. Like, they should know those trivia, answers.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I remember, like, as a kid, there would be these key rings, and obviously there was no internet back then. I don't know how my parents got them or if we got them from school, but there would be those trivia questions, like be random, and you would flip it, you would ask your friends, and then it would be wrong. You would correct them. I would go and study those. It was just fun to like do that. I don't see a lot of those now that
Isn't
you
it?
mention it.
And that's what I miss the most.
Yeah,
And I'm telling you, they're not very useful in terms of,
yeah,
big curriculums or whatnot, but they're so good to know,
of course,
you know?
of course. Well, it's fascinating where we're headed in education. Just even doing this, you being in Madrid, we being in Los Angeles, we're learning from each other, hopefully putting thought-provoking content out there for teachers, educators, parents. We all have a role in educating the next generation. I think it's getting more and more critical. Um, I know you're busy. We don't have too much time. I would love to continue this and go
Sure.
deeper on specific subjects, maybe stick to language, but maybe tell us about your organization, how people can connect with you, where they can connect with you if they want to connect. Maybe they're in Spain, maybe they're in Europe, maybe they're abroad. How can they connect with you, and what can you help them with?
Sure. We have a very small online academy, online school through which we teach students English, and especially English that needs to be certified by Cambridge University. That's our main aim, to help students get that certificate. They can always drop by our website, which is gogetteringlish.es or gogetter.school. Those are our two outlets. And of course, on Instagram, they can follow us on GoGetter English. TikTok, of course, GoGetter English. They can just check us out. We're everywhere. We try to be everywhere.
Sure.
It's hard work. It's
Yeah,
harder than teaching.
we have to be in this globalized economy.
Right.
Well, I appreciate you so much, Rohit. I'm going to drop the links in the description. And if you guys found some value out of this, please like, comment, subscribe. Tell us something that you learned, and hopefully we can improve and have better, fruitful conversations for you guys. So thank you so much for joining, my friend. We'll definitely chat.
Thank you so much, Arjun, for having me. Really, it was amazing talking to you.
Awesome. Wonderful.